Welcome to Changes in the Home Following a Gluten-Free Lifestyle. This video is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional dietary or medical advice. If you've been told recently that you need to follow a strict gluten-free lifestyle, imagining what that life will look like may seem a little unclear at the moment. These videos are aimed at providing clarity around how certain areas of life may be different as you live out a gluten-free lifestyle. Your home life is one of those areas and one of the most important for you to adjust so that you can live in harmony with your body's needs and with the other people in your household. Although the changes required are small in isolation, throwing out habitual behaviours and getting a hold of new ones can feel daunting. And if you do live with others, the need for them to catch on to the new ways of living adds a whole other layer of complexity. With awareness and experience and support from those around you, the changes that need to be made in your home life can be easy and achievable. The main things that I recommend for making life at home more conducive to living a gluten-free lifestyle are to know labelling and to shop smart. So the explanation around labelling laws has already been covered in the previous labelling video. This knowledge will impact the products that you buy before you even bring them into the home. If you do share food with others, they too will need to understand what is gluten-free and what isn't, and possibly how to read labelling, so that the foods that are purchased for you are suitable and safe. Cross-contamination or accidental contamination are areas that require awareness, consideration, and changes in behaviour to reduce the risk. Cross-contamination is when gluten is transferred from one surface, such as a utensil or a gluten-containing food, to a gluten-free surface, resulting in it no longer being gluten-free. I have 1,000,001 examples of how this can occur. For example, someone is using a knife to spread butter onto their wheat toast and then going in for just a little bit more, transferring the crumbs from the toast back into the butter container. Or someone taking a cracker, a wheat cracker, and using it to get some dip, inevitably putting crumbs into the dip. So what was potentially a specifically gluten-free dip is now no longer gluten-free. And what seems like maybe an insignificant behaviour of eating gluten-containing potato chips and then putting the same hand into the gluten-free packet, this can also transfer gluten. As you continue on your gluten-free journey, you will see it happen over and over and over again as you become aware of what to look for. In order for it to be minimised, it requires everyone in your household to be aware and to practice simple risk reduction behaviours. Cross-contamination and accidental contamination can be secret saboteurs to your healing, as they can lead to you unknowingly ingesting gluten due to its unobvious presence. In a perfect world, to avoid cross-contamination, you wouldn't even bring gluten into the household to begin with. But as a previous gluten eater, I know that some glutinous foods are just so much more tasty and cheaper than their gluten-free counterparts. So therefore, most people who don't need to eat gluten-free wouldn't choose to do so. In the circumstance that gluten is a part of your household, the following are some things that you can do. You and all those in your household need to be aware of how cross-contamination occurs. Cross-contamination can occur through the shared use of cooking devices. In some circumstances, when cleaning the device thoroughly isn't possible or not something that you want to do regularly because it's quite burdensome, you can have separate cooking devices. It may be the easiest and safest way to avoid cross-contamination. For example, the toaster. It would be near impossible to remove all traces of cooked on glutinous bread. There are alternatives such as using toaster bags, but if you use a toaster regularly, the easiest and cheapest and probably most environmentally friendly option is having a dedicated gluten-free toaster in the house, and for all people to be aware of the importance of not putting glutinous bread in it. In the same category may be pie makers, waffle makers, and other cooking devices with intricate areas that are difficult to get 100% clean of all of the previous gluten-containing foods like batters and pastry. If you can't guarantee that you are able to remove all of the traces, you are best to have a separate cooking device for gluten-free. Chopping boards are another one. They have cuts and crevices where gluten can stick, and it's impossible to know if they have been cleaned to perfection. So having a dedicated chopping board is the ideal scenario. But if you can't have your own chopping board, cutting your food on a plate is another alternative. To reduce the risk of cross-contamination, ensure that your kitchen items are washed properly. Plates, bowls, cutlery, glasses can all have leftover bits of gluten on them. If you have a dishwasher, this may be the best way to wash your kitchen items, but if not, ensure that you're following adequate washing technique to remove as much gluten as possible. Cleaning of kitchen surfaces is also a must. Surfaces like benches, stovetops, ovens, grills, and barbecues can have residual gluten on them. If gluten-containing foods have been cooked or prepared on a surface, be sure to wash them thoroughly before using them for gluten-free food preparation. A cheat way around this could be around the need to clean surfaces, could be to use baking paper or alfoil to separate the gluten-free food from the surface, adding an extra layer of protection. This can also be used for baking pans and oven trays to reduce the risk. Personal hygiene can also contribute to a safe gluten-free environment. So washing your hands thoroughly between handling gluten-containing foods and non-gluten containing foods is of utmost importance. People who have gluten on their hands or their clothing, such as when they're baking a cake and they wipe their hands on an apron or a tea towel, they can then inadvertently transfer that gluten by placing that tea towel on a bench, for example, or using it to dry utensils or to even dry their hands whilst they're handling gluten-free food. It's not just important that you have a better understanding of how to reduce the risk of gluten ingestion, but also that others are aware so that they don't compromise your efforts. And it more often than not isn't out of malice, but simply a lack of understanding of how certain behaviours can lead to ingesting gluten and the detrimental effects that could have on you. Others aren't aware because they likely haven't needed to be. So in a way, it's on you to help them to understand. I have friends who go out of their way to make sure that they're cooking me beautiful gluten-free meals, but then they accidentally add an ingredient, assuming that it's gluten-free, but it isn't, like soy sauce, and it's only my astute eye that I'll catch when things have been glutened, such as soy sauce in a stew or oat milk in a potato bake. These things could have my fastidious efforts to be gluten-free come a gutser, which is Aussie for fail miserably. If they are willing, it would be worth for the people that you live with to watch these videos too, in all of the videos in the course if they're willing, to help them to understand about cross-contamination and labelling, or for you to explain it to them to improve your home environment. If they aren't aware, they may be doing things that you aren't privy to that are causing you to continue to ingest gluten without your knowing, which could prolong your symptoms and intestinal damage. Some other simple ways to reduce the risk are to put gluten-free foods at the top of the fridge or the pantry so there's less risk of the gluten dropping onto the foods beneath them. Serve gluten and gluten-free foods on separate serving platters with separate serving utensils. Have separate and clearly labelled spreads so you can double dip that knife all you like. And with shared meals, have the celiac or the gluten-free person serve themselves first. This way cross-contamination is at its lowest when everything is consciously and freshly prepared. Make people aware. If you have guests for dinner and they don't understand the simple act of using the same spoon for the bread and butter pudding and then putting it into the meringue now means no dessert for you. Educate them. I'm sure it isn't a big deal to them to use a different spoon for the different desserts, but going out without dessert, I can tell you, is a big deal for me. At first, a lot of people find it easier to eat at home as a newly diagnosed celiac, as they take their first steps into the gluten-free world of living. Having a safe and carefree space to cook and eat can feel like a sanctuary, and when you have improvement in symptoms, it can feel sometimes like it's not even worth the risk to eat out when you know that you will be safe and comfortable at home. But in the next video, I will walk you through experience of dining out and give you tips and tricks on how to lower the risk so you can continue to enjoy the flavours of restaurant eating and the social gatherings around coffee meetups, and to continue living life as normal as possible. In summary, educate yourself and other household members on labelling, shopping, and ways you can reduce the risk of cross-contamination. Separate cooking utensils and other cooking devices and ensure that they're thoroughly cleaned between uses to reduce the risk of cross-contamination. Store gluten-free foods carefully in the fridge or pantry where they can be at the top if possible and appropriately labelled. And if gluten is present on your hands or clothing, wash them or change them before handling gluten-free items. Ensure all surfaces are thoroughly cleaned and educate yourself and others in your household on the best practices for living a gluten-free life.